So, when it comes to horror, I want you to tell me, when it comes to horror directors or producers or anything of that degree, what pictures come to mind first and foremost? Some of you would say Tobe Hooper, some of you say Wes Craven, some of you would say John Carpenter, and some of you would say some newer faces like Jordan Peele and Mike Flanagan and others. But I would dare say, and those are, by the way, all great answers. There's no wrong answers when it comes to that. Unless it's Uwe Boll, then, get the fuck out. But I would dare say there is someone else who, while he never directed a film, his imprint on horror is very underrated, and you can still feel it, though. That being Val Lewton. Now, if Val Lewton is a name that doesn't sound familiar to you, Val Lewton was a producer at RKO Studios, and RKO at the time was kind of going through it. RKO had basically been near bankruptcy in the 1930s and 40s due to a lot of costly mistakes. I think one of them was that their production on what was it? There was a production on several movies that had gone over budget and they just weren't making the money back. So they looked over the fence at Universal Pictures and went, "Hey, you think we can make cheap horror movies and get our money back?" And that was the idea. So they went to Val Lewton and his team and basically said, RKO basically said, "Hey, we're putting you on the the horror movie projects." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So basically they would come up with movie posters, and they would have to build a story around the movie poster. That was the whole thing. That was the whole story at first. And the first thing they did was cat people. They basically looked at the Wolfman and went, "We can do that with cats." And sure enough, Val Lewton and his team worked on it. But the thing was, even though they wanted a Wolfman-like movie, RKO wasn't going to get one. Because RKO didn't have a lot of money, and Val Lewton was more interested in telling a psychological drama. You see, Lewton is basically a proto-version of Alfred Hitchcock. In fact, I would not be shocked if a Hitchcock, though he would never admit it, would probably take a lot of inspiration from Lewton. Lewton and his team basically worked with what they had, and what they had wasn't much. So they basically created a more tension-filled movie. You do get a cat animal in here, but it's not the way you would think. That's what I really like about Val Lewton movies, is that these films are basically more built on tension and atmosphere and drama. They're very more in your head. It's more about the story, especially Cat People. Cat People was a perfect example of what's in your head will be way more scarier than anything you see on screen. It's much again, I would not be... Lewton also created the jump scare and timed it perfectly. Every Lewton movie has the Lewton scare. What I guess it was called the bus scare originally, before it was called the jump scare. Again, cycling back to Cat People, you've probably heard this story already of the original film. That scare was built from a jump scare from a bus parking and making this loud hiss. It was basically the forerunner of, and it became a staple of horror to come. Now, Lewton basically never really did there were signs of I Walked with a Zombie, and again, cycling back to Cat People and others, where those films implied that there's a monster, but also the monster in your head is scarier than what you will see on picture. Now, it's also interesting to note that Val Lewton and his team were more or less just masters of atmosphere and tension than anything else, to make you dread the shadow, the darkest parts of the screen, which they intentionally in some cases made darker just so the shadows were used perfectly. And there are some amazing jump scares that even get me to this day. Not just the bus scare, but also my first unintentional Val Lewton movie, which I didn't realize until years later that was a Val Lewton movie, was Island of the Dead, which was also a Boris Karloff movie. And I love this. And also, if you want to know more about Val Lewton pictures, please, I implore you to go check out Dark Corners Review Movies and their whole mini documentary on Val Lewton and his filmography. I highly recommend it. I'm just giving you a taste at the moment. But yeah, my first incursion and my first time seeing a Val Lewton movie, even though at the time I didn't know it was a Val Lewton movie, was Isle of the Dead, which was a Boris Karloff movie, and I was just watching because I was like, ooh, Karloff. The movie is it's a story that's actually based off of a painting that was in Lewton's childhood home, and follows the Vovalika, which is a vampire of ancient Greek myth, I believe. And basically, the movie is so tension and scary. There's one scene where like a woman gets trapped in a coffin, and you hear banging and the loudest ungodly scream that still rings in the back of my head to this day. And I was, I think, about 16 when I watched this movie. I will never forget that scream for in film. I would love to get Isle of the Dead on Blu-ray. That's the other thing, is that it's kind of hard to get Val Lewton movies on Blu-ray, because a lot of them are Criterion Collection. And we all know how expensive Criterion is. I, thankfully, do have one of his films, The Body Snatcher, which was the first collaboration with Karloff. And I love the story that involved Karloff, where Karloff had signed on to RKO Pictures after his deal with Universal had run over, and Lewton and some of his team members were like pissed that they had to work with Karloff, because the studio's basically making them, hey, it's Boris Karloff, he's big in horror, you're doing this. So already they were like, I don't want to fucking do this, I don't want to talk to this guy. And then they saw Karloff sitting at a breakfast table, and like out in the sunny morning, he's drinking tea, and he goes, hello, gentlemen, how are you today? And they fell in love with him. Like, they immediately was like, gosh, shucks, hi. So immediately Karloff and Lewton hit it off, and that led to several pictures together. I would love to get more Val Lewton movies personally, but again, a lot of them are Criterion Collection, and a lot of them are expensive. The only one I do have is The Body Snatcher, which I think is Karloff's second best performance as Mr. Gray. I think that's his second best performance behind The Monster. Sometimes I would dare say, if you ask me every other day, I might say that's his best performance. But yeah. So if you want to check out some horror films, I think you could actually watch The Leopard Man, which I highly recommend. It was his second picture. You can find it here on YouTube if you want to get a taste of a Val Lewton picture. I think you can also find I Walked with a Zombie on Tubi still. I could be wrong. But yeah. So I highly recommend, for as long as I live, I will be shouting Val Lewton. Even though he never directed a film, he produced some of the best tension horror films of all time. But if you've seen a Val Lewton movie, let me know in the comments below what were some of your favorites. Just comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.